Deep in the heart of Valdora, where eternal winter reigns, the ice tombs stand as a monument to nature's cruelest deceptions. For centuries, these crystalline caverns have swallowed explorers whole, nobles, warriors, and mages alike, all seeking the rumored treasures within. None returned, until now, when Seris, a flame weaver with defiance in her heart, ventured into the depths to rescue her captured mentor. The kingdom held its breath. Days passed. Hope faded. Then, against all odds, she emerged, changed, determined, and wielding a sword wreathed in living flame. But what truly happened in those frozen chambers? What ancient power now courses through her veins? And most crucially, what price did she pay to challenge the Ice Warden's domain and live to tell the tale? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The candle flames danced across Master Aldrin's weathered face as he studied his ancient spellbook, its pages yellowed and worn from decades of use. Seris watched him from across his study, her own hands wrapped around a cup of steaming tea that did little to ward off Valdora's perpetual chill. Even here, in the relative warmth of the Flame Weaver's Academy, winter's bite found ways to seep through stone walls and sealed windows. "You're brooding again?" Aldrin said without looking up, a slight smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I can hear your thoughts from here, like kindling crackling before it catches." Seris set down her cup, the ceramic clicking against the wooden table. "The ice tombs claimed 3 more lives yesterday. The Merchants Guild expedition." Aldrin closed his book, his finger marking his place. "The fools who thought wealth could overcome wisdom. They were prepared, Master. They had maps, supplies, even a guide who'd ventured a league into the outer chambers before." Seris stood, pacing the length of the study. Flames flickered higher in the hearth as she passed, responding to her agitation. "What makes these tombs so different from any other ruins in Valdora?" Aldrin's expression grew serious. He reopened his spellbook, but not to his previous page. Instead, he turned to a section near the back, where his own handwriting filled the margins of the original text. "Come here, child. There's something I've been meaning to show you." Seris approached, noting how the candlelight seemed to shy away from the ink of Aldrin's notes, as if the very words repelled illumination. The page showed a detailed drawing of what appeared to be a massive doorway, carved from ice, runes etched deep into its surface. "The ice tombs are not mere ruins," Aldrin said softly. "They're a prison, though what they contain has been lost to history. Some say it holds an ancient power that could end our eternal winter. Others believe it guards something far worse, a force that would make our current climate seem like a summer's day in comparison." He traced one of the runes with a wrinkled finger. "These markings, I've spent years studying them. They speak of balance, of fire and ice locked in an eternal dance. The ancients understood something we've forgotten. That true power lies not in dominance, but in harmony." "Is that why you've been teaching me control rather than raw power?" Seris asked, thinking of their countless lessons focused on precision over force. Aldrin nodded, pride warming his features. "You're the first student I've had who truly grasps this. Most flame weavers seek only to burn brighter, hotter, thinking that strength alone will overcome the cold. But fire unchecked destroys everything, including itself." He lifted his hands, conjuring a tiny flame that burned blue-white in his palm. "Watch." The flame began to spin, forming a perfect sphere that neither grew nor diminished. Snow crystals materialized around it, orbiting like stars around a sun, close enough to catch its light but never melting. "Balance," he whispered. "This is what the ancients knew, what the ice tombs protect. And it's why—" He hesitated, extinguishing the flame with a quick gesture. "It's why I believe I've finally found a way inside." Seris felt her heart skip. "Master, you can't be serious. After what happened to the expedition, they sought treasure." Aldrin interrupted, his voice firm. "I seek understanding. There's a difference." He turned more pages, revealing detailed maps and diagrams. "I've discovered references to a hidden entrance, one that requires neither brute force nor wealth to access. But it does require something unique, a flame weaver who understands balance. The implications slowly dawned on Seris. You've been preparing me for this, haven't you? All these years of training. I've been preparing you to understand. Aldrin corrected gently. What you choose to do with that understanding is your own decision. But yes, I believe you might be capable of something remarkable. He closed the book carefully, his movements deliberate. Tomorrow I will attempt to enter the ice tombs through this hidden path. I don't ask you to follow, only to remember what I've taught you about balance. Whatever happens, that knowledge may prove more valuable than you realize. Seris wanted to protest, to argue, to demand he reconsider, but she recognized the resolve in his eyes, the same look he wore when teaching a particularly crucial lesson. Instead, she asked, "Will you at least let me help you prepare?" Aldrin smiled, reaching for his tea. "Of course. After all, what kind of teacher would I be if I didn't offer one final lesson?" They spent the rest of the evening reviewing his preparations, checking supplies, and going over the maps one last time. Neither mentioned the possibility that this might be their final conversation, but the knowledge hung in the air like frost, delicate and dangerous. As Seris finally prepared to leave, Aldrin called her back. "One more thing." He retrieved a small, leather-bound journal from his desk. "My personal notes on the ice tombs. Keep them safe for me." She took the journal, feeling its weight, physical and metaphorical, in her hands. "I'll guard it well, Master. I know you will." He paused, then added softly, "Remember, Seris, the greatest power often lies not in what we can unleash, but in what we choose to contain." She nodded, clutching the journal to her chest, and stepped out into the winter night. The eternal stars of Valdora glittered overhead like shards of ice, beautiful and cold and unchanging. But for the first time, she wondered if perhaps they too might be hiding secrets about balance and power, waiting for someone wise enough to understand. Dawn never truly broke in Valdora. It merely suggested itself in shades of grey and silver, like light filtered through ancient ice. Seris stood at the window of her quarters in the academy, watching the eternal frost patterns shift across the glass. 3 days had passed since Master Aldrin's departure, and still no word. The eternal frost map lay spread across her desk, its enchanted surface shimming with tiny movements as the kingdom's treacherous paths shifted and changed. Originally created by the first flame weavers to track safe routes through Valdora's perpetual winter, the map had become increasingly complex over the centuries as the cold deepened and spread. Now it showed a kingdom slowly being devoured by its own climate. A knock at her door interrupted her brooding. "Enter," she called, not turning from the window. Council member Theron swept in, his official robes trimmed with frost-resistant fur. Unlike most of Valdora's nobility, who wore their winter gear like armor, Theron moved through the cold with the ease of someone who had long ago made peace with it. "I thought I might find you here," he said, his voice carrying the practiced smoothness of a career politician. "The council is concerned about Master Aldrin's expedition." Seris finally turned to face him. Concerned for his safety, or concerned about what he might discover? Theron's smile didn't waver. Both, naturally. The ice tombs have been sealed for generations, and for good reason. "The Ice Warden is a myth," Seris interrupted, though she remembered Aldrin's warnings about the ancient guardian. "A story to keep people from exploring ruins that the council would rather keep secret. All myths have their roots in truth, young flame weaver." Theron approached her desk, studying the eternal frost map with apparent interest. "Just as all secrets have their purpose, your master should have understood that better than most." The use of past tense wasn't lost on Seris. He's only been gone 3 days. And in 300 years, no one who has ventured beyond the outer chambers has survived longer than 2. Theron traced a route on the map with one gloved finger. The ice tombs do not relinquish what they claim. Better to accept that now than to nurture false hope. Seris felt heat rise within her, but remembered Aldrin's lessons about control. Is that the Council's official position, then, that we should abandon him? The Council's position is that we should protect our people from following his example. Theron straightened, adjusting his robes. These are difficult times, Seris. The winter grows deeper each year. The northern settlements report new ice. Formations, more aggressive than any we've seen before. We cannot afford to lose more lives to ancient mysteries. And if those ancient mysteries hold the key to ending the winter, then they also likely hold the power to make it worse. Theron moved toward the door but paused before exiting. The Council has voted to seal the Ice Tomb's main entrance. Permanently? I thought you should know, out of respect for your master's position at the Academy. After he left, Seris returned to the map. Her fingers traced the route she knew Aldrin had taken, following his theoretical hidden entrance. The enchanted parchment shifted beneath her touch, revealing new paths and dangers, as if responding to her intent. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of the city awakening, the crack of ice as street warmers made their morning rounds, using weak fire magic to clear the major thoroughfares, the calls of frosthawks bred over generations to survive the eternal winter. The deep grinding of the great mechanized lifts that transported goods and people between Valdora's levels, powered by carefully controlled flame weaver energy, a civilization built on the premise of survival, of endurance against an endless winter, but at what cost? How many secrets had been buried, how many possibilities abandoned in the name of stability? Seris rolled up the map, her decision crystallizing like frost on glass. The Council might be content to maintain their careful balance of power, to manage rather than solve their kingdom's slow freeze. But Aldrin had taught her that true balance wasn't about maintaining the status quo. It was about understanding the deeper harmonies that made change possible. She picked up his journal, feeling the weight of its secrets. If there was even a chance that the Ice Tombs held the key to ending Valdora's winter, someone had to try. And if that someone had to understand the balance between fire and ice, between power and control, well, she hadn't spent all those years learning precision for nothing. Outside her window, the eternal stars continued their cold vigil over Valdora, unchanging as they had been for centuries. But perhaps, Seris thought, it was time for someone to change them. After all, even ice could burn if you understood its nature well enough. She began to pack. The markets of Lower Valdora existed in a perpetual twilight, warmed by hundreds of carefully maintained heat crystals that cast an amber glow through the ice-carved tunnels. Seris pulled her frost-lined cloak tighter as she made her way through the crowds, one hand clasped around the ember pendant at her throat. The ancient family heirloom pulsed with generations of stored fire magic, its warmth a constant reminder of her heritage and her responsibility. You're either very brave or very foolish to wear that so openly here, a voice whispered from the shadows of a merchant's stall. There are those who'd kill for a genuine flame weaver artifact. Seris turned to find a woman examining her with eyes the color of glacier ice. Despite the biting cold of Lower Valdora, she wore only a thin, leather coat trimmed with frostwool fur. A climber's harness crossed her chest, hung with tools and mysterious pouches. Kira Stonesinger, the woman introduced herself with a slight bow. I knew your master. He commissioned some of my maps before She left the sentence unfinished. Before he disappeared into the Ice Tombs, Seris completed. Not died. There's a difference. Kira's expression softened. There might be at that. Come with me. This isn't a conversation for public spaces. They wound their way deeper into the market, eventually ducking through a hidden door into what appeared to be a cartographer's workshop. Maps covered every surface, some drawn on traditional parchment, others etched into thin sheets of ice that somehow remained solid despite the room's relative warmth. Aldrin visited me the day before he entered the tombs, Kira said, clearing space on a workbench. He showed me things, calculations, theories about the ancient pathways, things that made me question everything I thought I knew about the Ice Tombs. Did he mention a hidden entrance? Seris asked, hope flickering in her chest like a newly kindled flame. Better. Kira retrieved a sealed tube from a locked cabinet. He left this with me. along with instructions to share it only with someone who understood the true nature of balance. She fixed Seris with a penetrating stare, someone who could demonstrate that understanding. Seris touched her pendant, feeling its stored power. Then carefully she extended her other hand and created a flame that danced above her palm. But instead of letting it grow, she compressed it, refined it, until it burned with the pure blue-white intensity that Aldrin had taught her to achieve. Snow crystals began to form around it, caught in its perfect orbit. Kira's eyes widened. By the eternal frost, he actually found someone who could do it. Do what? Exactly. Create a flame, cold enough to survive the deep ice. Kira broke the seal on the tube and extracted a rolled parchment. The ice tombs aren't just a maze of frozen tunnels. They're a test designed to destroy anyone who tries to force their way through with brute strength alone. But someone who understands the harmony between fire and ice. She spread the parchment across the workbench. It showed a detailed cross-section of the ice tombs, with notations in Aldrin's careful hand. But unlike any map Seris had seen before, this one showed paths that seemed to exist between the known chambers, impossible routes that passed through solid ice. These passages, Kira explained, tracing one with her finger, they're real, but they only become visible to those who can maintain the perfect balance between heat and cold. Too much fire, and you'll melt your way into a death trap. Too little, and you'll never see them at all. Seris studied the map, her mind racing. This is how he got in. But why hasn't he come out? Perhaps he's still searching for what he went in to find. Kira began gathering supplies from around her workshop, ropes, pitons, strange devices Seris didn't recognize. Or perhaps he found it and discovered he needed help to bring it back out. "You're going to help me?" Seris asked, surprised by the woman's apparent preparedness. Kira paused in her packing. "Your master saved my life once, in the high peaks where even the stone singers fear to climb. I owe him a debt." She tossed Seris a harness similar to her own. "Besides, I've spent my life mapping the impossible. The chance to explore paths that only exist through magical balance? That's worth any risk." They spent the next hours preparing, with Kira explaining the use of each piece of specialized equipment. Climbing tools modified for ice so cold it shattered normal metal, breathing masks for areas where the air itself froze, emergency beacons that would activate in response to body heat or its absence. As they worked, Kira shared her own theories about the ice tombs. The deeper chambers don't follow normal laws of nature. Space behaves strangely there. Time, too, according to some accounts. The only consistent factor is that those who try to fight against the cold invariably lose. "But those who work with it?" Seris asked, checking the straps on her harness. "That's what we're going to find out." Kira hesitated, then pulled a small package from one of her pouches. "One last thing. Your master left this as well." Inside the package, Seris found a crystal vial filled with what appeared to be liquid starlight. A note in Aldrin's handwriting read, "For when fire isn't enough." "What is it?" "He called it essence of pure winter," Kira said. "Collected from the heart of a glacier older than Valdora itself. I've never seen anything like it." Seris carefully tucked the vial into a protected pocket next to Aldrin's journal. Her hand brushed the ember pendant, and she felt its warmth surge in response to her touch, as if recognizing the presence of its opposite. "When do we leave?" she asked. Kira glanced out her workshop's small window at the ever-present twilight. "The council's workers will begin sealing the main entrance at dawn, but they don't know about the hidden paths. We can use that confusion as cover." She shouldered her pack. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we find out if your master's theories about balance are truly the key to surviving the ice tombs." As Seris prepared to leave, Kira caught her arm. "One more thing. Whatever we find in there, whatever happens, remember that the tombs change people. The ones who ventured deepest and returned, the few who made it even partway in, they all came back different. Different how?" "That's the thing," Kira said softly. "Each one was different in their own way, as if the tombs themselves shaped them according to some pattern we can't understand." Seris touched her pendant once more, feeling the generations of fire magic stored within. Then let's hope we understand enough about balance to shape our own path. The ember pendant pulsed once, strongly, as if in agreement or warning. In the false dawn of Valdora's eternal twilight, the ice tomb's main entrance loomed like a wound in the glacier's face. Council workers swarmed around it, their torchlights casting frantic shadows as they prepared the massive ice-steel doors for permanent sealing. None of them noticed two figures slipping through the crystalline crags half a league to the east, where the glacier's surface was a maze of twisted ice spires. "The hidden entrance should be here," Kira whispered, consulting the crystal compass in her palm. The ancient device, its housing carved from a single piece of diamond-clear ice, contained a drop of pure flame that danced and shifted as they moved. Unlike ordinary compasses that pointed north, this one was attuned to paths of magical resonance, or so Aldrin had claimed when he commissioned it. Seris pressed her hand against the glacier's surface, sending out the gentlest pulse of heat she could manage. The ice beneath her fingers responded with a whisper of cold that traced patterns through her awareness. "There's something different about the ice here. It feels almost alive." "The entire glacier is alive in its way," Kira said, adjusting one of her climbing pitons. "The stone singers have known that for generations. Ice has memory. It flows, thinks, dreams, just on a timescale we can barely comprehend." The crystal compass's flame suddenly flared bright, pointing to what appeared to be a solid wall of ice. Seris approached it carefully, maintaining the delicate balance of heat and cold that Aldrin had taught her. As she drew closer, the ice seemed to shimmer, its crystalline structure revealing layers and depths that shouldn't have been possible. "Now that's interesting," Kira breathed, watching as Seris's careful manipulation of temperature began to reveal what looked like a doorway where solid ice had been moments before. "The passages aren't tunnels at all, are they? They're more like moments when the ice chooses to let us through." Seris nodded, understanding dawning. "That's why brute force never works. You can't break your way into a memory." The passage crystallized before them, its edges defined by facets of ice that caught and refracted light in impossible ways. Beyond it lay darkness deeper than any natural cave could hold, the kind of darkness that felt like it had weight and purpose. "Ready?" Kira asked, checking their safety lines one final time. Seris touched the ember pendant for reassurance, then created the perfectly balanced flame that would be their guide. "Ready?" They stepped through. The transition was unlike anything Seris had experienced. For a moment, it felt as if the ice itself had become permeable, allowing them to pass through its molecular structure rather than through any physical space. Then reality reasserted itself, and they found themselves in a chamber that defied explanation. The walls were perfectly smooth, yet carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when viewed directly. The air was cold enough to freeze normal breath, yet somehow remained breathable, and everywhere there were echoes, not of sound, but of magic. Ancient spells layered upon each other like geological strata, some so old they barely registered as more than whispers against Seris's magical senses. "The compass is going crazy," Kira reported, showing how the flame within the device now spun and danced in complex patterns. "It's reading multiple paths, some of them seemingly overlapping." Seris consulted Aldrin's journal, comparing his notes to their surroundings. He wrote about this. "The first chamber is a nexus point, multiple paths converging in ways that shouldn't be physically possible." "Any hint about which path he took?" Before Seris could answer, a sound echoed through the chamber, the sharp crack of ice shifting somewhere in the darkness. Both women froze, listening intently. The sound came again, closer this time, accompanied by what might have been footsteps. "We're not alone down here," Kira whispered, her hand moving to one of her climbing picks. Seris adjusted her flame, carefully modulating its heat to probe the darkness. The light revealed more of the chamber, including several archways that seemed to lead in physically impossible directions, one appearing to go sideways through solid ice, another apparently leading straight up into the glacier's heart. The footsteps grew closer, and with them came a sound that chilled Seris more than the supernatural cold. Singing. A low, melodic humming that seemed to resonate with the very ice around them. Ice wraiths, Kira breathed, her face pale. The legends say they're what's left of those who died seeking the tomb's secrets, frozen souls, bound to the glacier's memory. The singing grew louder, and Seris saw movement in one of the archways, a figure formed of translucent ice, its features, caught in an eternal moment of discovery or despair. It drifted toward them with terrible purpose, its song growing stronger. Seris felt the magic in her pendant pulse in response to the wraith's presence. The ice creature paused, cocking its head as if listening to something only it could hear. Then, to their astonishment, it spoke, its voice like wind through crystal caves. "The flame remembers," it said, gesturing to Seris's pendant. "As the ice remembers. But do you understand what that memory requires?" "I understand that balance is the key," Seris replied, carefully maintaining her control over both heat and cold. The wraith drifted closer, its form shifting between solid and transparent. "Many have spoken of balance, little flame, but speaking is not knowing. Knowing is not understanding. Understanding is not becoming." It reached out with a crystalline hand, not quite touching the pendant. "Your master understood. That is why he was permitted to pass deeper. That is why he still walks the memory paths below." Seris's heart leaped. "He's alive? Where? Alive? Dead?" Such simple terms for such complex states. The wraith began to fade. Follow the paths of harmony. Resist the urge to burn. Remember that ice too can flame. With that, it dissipated like frost in morning sun. Kira let out a shaky breath. "Well, that was educational," Seris finished, studying the archways with new understanding. She held up her balanced flame, watching how it interacted with the ice around them. Certain paths seemed to resonate with its harmony, while others remained dark and unyielding. "There," she said, pointing to an arch that spiraled impossibly through the chamber's wall. "That's where the balance is strongest. That's where he went." Kira checked their safety lines again, then nodded. "Lead on, Flame Weaver. Let's see what other memories the ice has in store for us." They stepped into the archway, and the ice tombs swallowed them whole, the crystal compass's flame dancing like a star caught in eternal ice. The spiral passage opened into a vast chamber that seemed to defy the natural order of things. Above them, below them, and on every side, identical archways punctuated walls of pristine ice. Gravity itself appeared uncertain here. Chunks of frozen debris hung suspended at impossible angles, and streams of glittering ice crystals flowed upward like reverse waterfalls. "The frost wraith's veil," Kira breathed, consulting Aldrin's maps. "It's said to be the first true guardian of the ice tombs. No one's ever documented what lies beyond it." Seris approached the center of the chamber, where a singular object hung, suspended in the air. A crystalline mask, its surface rippling like water despite the supernatural cold. As she drew closer, the frost wraith's veil began to pulse with an inner light, and a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere spoke. "Flame child, seeking paths of cold, through this veil your worth unfolds. Power unleashed will seal your doom. Control alone survives the tomb." The mask's surface suddenly erupted with images, reflections of Seris herself, but each one showing a different possible action. In one, she unleashed her full firepower, melting through the ice. In another, she froze in hesitation and succumbed to the cold. Dozens of potential fates played out across the veil's surface. "It's a test," Seris realized, remembering Aldrin's teachings, "but not of power, of understanding." Kira had moved to one of the walls, studying the strange flow of ice crystals. "These patterns, they're responding to the magic in the chamber. Whatever you do here will affect the entire space." Seris closed her eyes, feeling the delicate balance of energies around them. The chamber was a complex web of fire and ice, each force supporting and constraining the other in an eternal dance. To pass through, she would need to become part of that dance. "Stay back," she warned Kira, "and whatever happens, don't try to help." This is something I have to do alone." Taking a deep breath, Seris reached out and touched the frost wraith's veil. Instantly, cold beyond anything she'd ever experienced shot through her body. Her instincts screamed at her to fight it with fire, to burn away the killing frost. But Aldrin's voice echoed in her memory. True power lies not in dominance, but in harmony. Instead of fighting the cold, she let it in, let it flow through. Her alongside her inner flame, neither force overwhelming the other. The ember, pendant at her throat, pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat as she maintained the precarious balance. The mask's surface began to clear, showing her reflection, but not as she was. Instead, it showed her as she could be, a wielder of both fire and ice, understanding the true nature of both forces. Around her, the suspended ice debris began to move, forming intricate patterns in the air. "The flame remembers," she whispered, echoing the ice wraith's words. "As the ice remembers." The patterns grew more complex, and Seris realized they were forming a path, not through any of the physical archways, but through the space between them, a path that could only exist in the perfect balance between states. "Seris!" Kira's voice held equal parts awe and concern. "The chamber, it's changing." Indeed, the entire space seemed to be shifting, reality bending around the harmony Seris had created. The frost wraith's veil lifted from her grasp and shattered into countless glittering shards, each one catching and refracting light in a different direction. Then, in a moment of perfect clarity, Seris understood. The veil hadn't been a barrier to be overcome. It had been a lens through which to see the true nature of the ice tombs. The suspended shards weren't just reflecting light. They were reflecting possibilities. "There," she said, pointing to where the shard's light converged. "That's where the path continues." But as she stepped toward it, a new voice rang through the chamber, ancient, powerful, and tinged with both approval and warning. "The first trial is past, but understanding must become wisdom before the deeper paths open. What is given can be taken. What is learned can be unlearned. The price of passage is paid in change." The shards of the veil began to swirl around them, their light growing intense. Seris felt something shifting within her, as if the very essence of her flame weaving was being reshaped by the experience. "Your master walked this path," the voice continued, "paid this price. Now you must do the same." The light reached a blinding intensity, and Seris felt her consciousness expanding, touching aspects of magic she'd never known existed. When her vision cleared, she looked down at her hands in wonder. Where once she could only sense fire, now she could feel the intricate patterns of cold as well, not as an opposite to be fought, but as a complement to be understood. "What happened?" Kira asked, approaching cautiously. "Your flames, they're different." Seris created a small flame above her palm, but unlike before, this one was laced with delicate patterns of frost, fire, and ice existing simultaneously in perfect harmony. I think this is what Aldrin discovered, why he was so certain. There was more to the ice tombs than just ancient secrets. She extinguished the flame and turned to where the shard's light had revealed their path. The tombs don't just contain knowledge about balance, they change you to understand it. Each trial, each test, makes you more capable of reaching the deeper chambers, Kira finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. That's why no one who tried to force their way through ever survived. You have to be willing to be transformed by the journey itself. Seris nodded, touching the ember pendant. It felt different now, not just warm, but complex, like a prism refracting both heat and cold. "Shall we see what the next chamber has to teach us?" They stepped onto their revealed path, the shards of the frost wraith's veil glittering behind them like frozen stars. Ahead, the ice tombs stretched into impossible depths, each chamber promising new trials, new transformations, and perhaps, somewhere in their crystalline heart, answers to the questions that had driven Aldrin to venture into their depths. The voice spoke one final time as they departed. "The path of harmony opens before you, flame child. But remember, with each step deeper, you become more of what the tombs require and less of what you were. The next chamber was smaller, almost intimate, its walls lined with niches that held softly glowing memory crystals. Each crystal was unique, some clear as mountain springs, others clouded with swirling patterns of frost. As Seris and Kira entered, their breath frosting in the ancient air, the crystals began to pulse in sequence like heartbeats frozen in time. "I've heard of these," Kira said, her voice hushed with reverence. Memory crystals were used by the ancients to store knowledge, experiences, even entire lives. "But I've never seen so many in one place." Seris approached the nearest crystal, drawn by its familiar resonance. "This one, it feels like flame-weaving magic." She reached out, hesitated, then touched its surface with fingers wreathed in her new harmony of fire and frost. The crystal blazed to life, and suddenly the chamber disappeared. They stood instead, in a vast hall from Valdora's past, watching as robed figures performed intricate magical ceremonies. Their garments combined the red of flame weavers with the blue of ice mages, a combination that had been forbidden for centuries. A voice echoed through the vision, carrying the weight of ages. "We were wrong to separate the powers, fire and ice, heat and cold. They were never meant to be wielded alone. The eternal winter comes because we forgot the truth of harmony." The scene shifted, showing the construction of the ice tombs. But unlike the legends that painted them as a prison, these memories revealed their true purpose: a sanctuary, a place of transformation where the ancient arts of balanced magic could be preserved. "Look," Kira pointed to a figure directing the construction, "the Ice Warden, but not as a jailer." Indeed, the figure wore robes that shimmered with both frost and flame, wielding powers that shaped the very glacier itself. This was the Ice Warden, as they had been meant to be. Not a cruel guardian, but a keeper of balance, a protector of ancient wisdom. The crystal's light faded, but others began to activate, each sharing its own fragment of the past. Seris moved from crystal to crystal, absorbing their knowledge. She saw the first signs of Valdora's eternal winter, watched as fear and political ambition drove a wedge between flame weavers and ice mages. They didn't just separate the magical disciplines, she realized, piecing together the fragments of history. They actively suppressed the knowledge of how to combine them. The council, they've known all along. One crystal, larger than the others and placed in a central position, caught her attention. Unlike the others, it seemed to contain not just memories, but something more, an active presence that watched them with ancient awareness. When Seris touched it, the voice that emerged was heartbreakingly familiar. "I knew you would find your way here, my student." "Master Aldrin!" Seris pressed her palm flat against the crystal surface, her new powers sensing the complex energies within. "How? This is only an echo," Aldrin's voice explained. "I left these impressions in the memory crystals as I progressed deeper into the tombs, hoping you would follow. What I've discovered here, it changes everything we thought we knew about Valdora's magic." The crystal showed Aldrin in another chamber, surrounded by ancient texts and artifacts. The eternal winter isn't a natural phenomenon, it's the result of broken harmony. The ice tombs were created to preserve the knowledge of how to restore that balance, but over time, their purpose was twisted. The Ice Warden became a prisoner of their own duty, bound by the same fears and divisions that plagued the kingdom above. "Where are you now?" Seris asked, her voice tight with emotion. "Are you still alive?" The image shifted, showing deeper chambers that seemed to defy reality itself. "I'm close to the heart of the tombs, where the original source of balanced magic still burns cold and hot at once. But I can't reach it alone. The final chambers, they require more than one practitioner of harmony. That's why I left these breadcrumbs, why I taught you about balance all those years." Kira, who had been studying the other crystals, suddenly called out, "Seris, you need to see this." Another crystal had activated, showing a different scene. More recent but no less significant, the current Council of Valdora, meeting in secret, discussing the ice tombs. "If anyone discovers the truth," one council member was saying, If they learn that we've deliberately maintained the separation of powers to protect our own authority, that's why they're sealing the entrance, Seris said, understanding dawning like a cold sun. Not to protect people, but to bury the truth. Aldrin's crystal pulsed once more. The path ahead grows more dangerous. The Ice Warden is no longer what they were meant to be. Centuries of isolation have twisted their purpose. They believe they protect the kingdom by maintaining its divisions, its eternal winter. To reach the heart chamber, you'll need to prove that harmony is possible, that balance can be restored. How? Seris asked, but the crystal was already dimming. Trust what I taught you. Aldrin's voice faded. And remember, the sword you seek is not just a weapon. It's a key, forged in the first days of harmony, waiting for someone who understands both flame and frost. The memory crystals pulsed one final time, then settled into their quiet glow, but they had served their purpose. Seris stood straighter, understanding flowing through her like a river of fire and ice. The council wasn't just hiding knowledge, she said to Kira. They were hiding hope, the possibility that things could be different. Kira nodded, adjusting her climbing gear. And now you know why. Power is easier to maintain when people believe they have no choice but to endure. Seris touched her pendant, feeling how it resonated differently with her transformed magic. We need to reach Aldrin, not just to save him, but to help him restore what was lost. She looked ahead, where the chamber's far wall seemed to ripple with potential passages. Ready for whatever the next trial holds? Lead on, Kira said, her eyes bright with shared purpose. Let's go make some new memories for these crystals to preserve. They stepped away from the wall of memory crystals, their soft light seeming to follow them like blessings or warnings. Ahead, the ice tomb's deeper chambers waited, each one promising new revelations, new transformations, and perhaps the power to change not just themselves, but the very nature of Valdora itself. Beyond the Chamber of Memories, the ice tombs plunged into darkness so profound it seemed to swallow light itself. Even Seris's balanced flame struggled to penetrate more than a few feet ahead, its glow absorbed by the ancient ice, as if the very walls were hungry for warmth. The Shadowfire lantern should help, Kira said, removing an ornate device from her pack. Its crystal housing was etched with runes that spiraled in mesmerizing patterns, and its core held what appeared to be a shard of pure darkness, shot through with veins of fire. Another of Aldrin's creations? Seris asked, recognizing her master's distinctive style in the runic patterns. One of his last. Kira held the lantern up, and its dark flame cast strange shadows that seemed to reveal rather than obscure. He said we'd need it for the deeper chambers, where normal light fails. As if in response to its activation, the ice around them began to change. The walls became transparent in places, revealing other passages that ran parallel to their own, and the figures that moved within them. "We're not alone down here," Seris whispered, watching as shadowy forms flickered through the adjacent tunnels. Some were clearly ice wraiths, their crystalline forms forever caught between states of being, but others, living explorers, Kira confirmed, her voice tight. Look at their equipment, modern climbing gear, council-issue cold weather suits. They must have found other ways in before the main entrance was sealed. The Shadowfire lantern's revelatory light showed more than just their fellow travelers. On the walls, previously invisible markings began to appear, ancient script that seemed to shift between languages, telling fragments of stories left by those who had ventured this deep before. Seris traced one set of markings with her fingers, combining her new sensitivity to cold with her flame weaving to interpret their meaning. These are warnings and instructions. In deepest dark where light fails, trust not your eyes, but the memory of flame. The path is not what it seems. As if to emphasize this point, their tunnel suddenly opened into a vast chamber where physics seemed more suggestion than law. Paths wound in impossible directions, crossing over and under each other like a maze. Designed by a mad architect, Some routes led straight up into darkness, others appeared to loop back on themselves, and still others seemed to lead everywhere and nowhere at once. The shadow fire lantern's light revealed glimpses of other explorers scattered throughout the chamber, each group trying to navigate its peculiar geometry. As Seris watched, one team attempted to force their way through what appeared to be a promising route, using heat tools to melt the ice. "Wait," she called out, but her voice didn't carry across the strange space. The explorers' tools flared, and the ice around them responded with devastating speed, sealing them in a crystalline tomb that froze solid before their screams could fade. "The tombs don't forgive brute force," Kira murmured, checking their safety lines for the 100th time. "But how do we find the right path? Everything here seems to lead to death or confusion." Seris studied the chamber, letting her transformed magical senses extend beyond normal perception. The balanced power within her resonated with certain paths, while recoiling from others. But more than that, she began to understand what the wall markings had meant about trusting the memory of flame. "It's not about finding the right path," she realized. "It's about understanding that the paths themselves are memories. The ice remembers every step ever taken here, every route ever attempted. We're not choosing between existing paths. We're deciding which memories to trust." She created a small flame infused with frost, letting it dance above her palm. The Shadowfire lantern responded, its dark fire seeming to reach out toward her balanced light. Where the two illuminations met, certain paths in the chamber began to glow with a deep, resonant purpose. "These are the routes taken by those who understood harmony," she explained, watching how the light revealed a complex network of interconnected passages. "See how they flow together? Each successful journey became part of the tomb's memory, creating a guide for those who followed." A sound echoed through the chamber then, part crystal chime, part deep resonance. Another group of explorers, this one wearing the distinctive marks of ice mages, had discovered a different way forward. Instead of fighting the ice, they were singing to it, their voices harmonizing with the tomb's natural frequencies. "They understand part of it," Seris observed. "But without the balance of fire and frost, they'll only make it so far." As if to prove her point, the ice mage's path carried them to a junction where their magic alone proved insufficient. They retreated, their songs fading into the darkness, while the path Seris had revealed continued deeper. "This way," she said, taking the lead. "But stay close to me. The memories aren't stable. They shift based on how we interact with them." They began their traverse of the impossible chamber, following paths that existed as much in magical resonance as in physical space. The Shadowfire lantern's dark flame guided them, revealing hidden dangers and showing which memories could be trusted. Other explorers watched their progress with mixed expressions of awe and envy. Some called out, asking for guidance or offering alliances. But Seris knew they couldn't stop. Each path through the chamber was personal, each journey unique. The most they could do was demonstrate that passage was possible through understanding rather than force. As they neared what seemed to be the chamber's exit, a voice echoed from one of the crystalline walls. Another explorer, trapped between layers of ice but somehow still conscious. "Help us," the figure pleaded, pressing a hand against their frozen prison. "We've been here for days, trying to understand the paths." Seris paused, studying the trapped explorer with both normal and magical senses. The ice around them was different from the deadly tomb that had claimed the heat tool users. This was a holding pattern, a test rather than a punishment. "What have you learned?" she asked, her voice carrying clearly through the ice. The explorer's eyes widened at her display of balanced magic. "That everything we thought we knew about the tombs was wrong. They're not a maze to be solved or an obstacle to be overcome. They're trying to teach us something." "Then you're already on the right path," Seris said. She pressed her own hand against the ice, letting her balanced power flow into it. The crystal prison began to sing, its resonance changing from containment to release. "The tombs don't want to trap us, they want to transform us, but we have to be willing to change." The ice shifted, flowing like water for a moment before reforming as a bridge to one of the safer paths. The explorer stepped free, looking at their hands in wonder. The cold, it feels different now. Follow that feeling, Seris advised. Let it guide you. But remember, true harmony can't be rushed. They left the explorer contemplating their changed relationship with the ice, continuing their own journey deeper into the tombs. The Shadowfire lantern's light seemed stronger now, as if it too had learned something from the encounter. You could have just left them, Kira observed as they entered a new tunnel. Seris shook her head. No, I couldn't. That's what the Council would do, keep the knowledge of harmony for themselves. If we want to truly change things, we have to show others that change is possible. The Shadowfire lantern flared in agreement, its dark flame casting their shadows ahead, like prophecies into the deeper darkness. Somewhere ahead, Aldrin waited near the heart of the tombs, and with each step, each transformation, each small act of shared understanding, they drew closer to not just finding him, but fulfilling the true purpose of his journey. The tunnel ended abruptly at a vast circular chamber that took Seris's breath away. At its center, suspended in a column of pure energy, hung the frozen heart, a massive crystal that pulsed with alternating waves of heat and cold, so intense that even from a distance they could feel its power buffeting them like a storm. The heart of the ice tombs, Kira whispered, her voice filled with awe. I never thought the stories don't do it justice. Indeed, no tale could have prepared them for this. The frozen heart was neither ice nor flame, but something that existed. In the space between, a physical manifestation of the harmony Seris had been learning to understand. Its surface rippled with patterns that mirrored the balance magic now flowing through her veins. But it wasn't the heart alone that commanded their attention. Before it stood two figures, one familiar, the other legendary. Master Aldrin, Seris breathed, taking an instinctive step forward. Her mentor stood with his back to them, facing the towering form of what could only be the Ice Warden. Both were locked in what appeared to be an intense discussion, their voices carried away by the heart's pulsing energy. The Ice Warden was both more and less than the stories had claimed. Their form shifted constantly, sometimes appearing as a figure of pure ice, other times wreathed in cold fire. Their face, when it solidified enough to be seen, bore the weight of centuries. Enough! The Ice Warden's voice cut through the chamber's ambient energy, resonating with both heat and frost. You speak of harmony, Aldrin, but you cannot understand what maintaining it has cost. I understand better than you. Think, Aldrin replied, his voice stronger than Seris remembered. I've walked your paths, learned your trials. The tombs have changed me, as they've changed my student. He turned then, meeting Seris's eyes across the chamber. Right on time, my dear. The Ice Warden's attention snapped to Seris and Kira, their form crystallizing into something more solid, a figure robed in ancient garments that shimmered with conflicting energies. So, you've brought another flame weaver to my domain, and this one, their eyes narrowed, studying Seris with ancient wisdom. This one carries the change more deeply than most. Seris stepped forward, letting her transformed magic flow visibly around her, fire and frost in perfect balance. I understand now what you really are. Not a jailer, but a teacher, a preserver of knowledge that was nearly lost. Knowledge that was deliberately buried, the Ice Warden corrected, their voice sharp as cracking ice, by those who feared what true harmony might mean for their carefully constructed power structure. They gestured to the frozen heart. This is the source of Valdora's magic. Not just ice, not just fire, but the point where all energies meet and transform. For centuries, I've maintained the balance here, waiting for those who might understand its true purpose. But you've forgotten that purpose, Aldrin said quietly. You've become so focused on preserving the knowledge that you've forgotten it was meant to be shared. The Ice Warden's form flickered dangerously. Shared. Like the Council shares power. Like the Flame Weavers and Ice Mages share understanding. The world above is not ready for this knowledge. The world above is dying, Seris countered, taking another step forward. The frozen heart's energy responded to her presence, its pulses synchronizing with her own balanced magic. The eternal winter grows deeper each year because the natural harmony has been disrupted. You know this. You've always known this. Of course I know. The Ice Warden's voice shook the chamber. I was there when the division began. I watched as fear and ambition tore apart what should have remained whole. I saw how quickly power corrupts, how easily balance becomes dominance. Their forms solidified further, revealing eyes that held both ancient pain and terrible wisdom. That is why the tombs test as they do, why we transform those who enter. Because true harmony cannot be given, it must be understood, earned, embodied. The frozen heart pulsed more strongly, and Seris felt something calling to her from deeper in the chamber, a presence that resonated with her transformed magic. A weapon, she realized, but also so much more. The sword Aldrin had sent her to find. Your trials have taught us well, she said, maintaining eye contact with the ancient guardian. Each chamber, each test, showed us another aspect of the harmony you protect. But a truth that never leaves these halls might as well be a lie. She's right, Aldrin added, moving to stand beside his student. I finally understand why you let me come this far, why you've waited all these centuries. You're not just looking for someone worthy of the knowledge, you're looking for someone to share your burden. The Ice Warden's form rippled, revealing a momentary glimpse of profound exhaustion beneath their powerful exterior. The sword you seek, they said slowly, is not just a weapon. It is a key, a focus, a catalyst for change. In the wrong hands, it could shatter the delicate balance I have maintained for so long. Or, Seris suggested, in the right hands it could help restore the harmony that was lost. She held out her hands, demonstrating the perfect balance of energies she now commanded. You've seen how the tombs have changed me, changed us. We're ready to understand. The chamber fell silent, save for the pulsing of the frozen heart. The Ice Warden studied them both, their ancient gaze seeming to peer into their very souls. Finally, they spoke again, their voice holding both promise and warning. Understanding is not enough. The sword demands more than knowledge, more than skill, more even than harmony. It demands sacrifice. They waved a hand, and the air beside. The frozen heart shimmered, revealing an alcove where a blade of impossible beauty hung suspended. Are you prepared to pay its price? Before Seris could respond, a new sound echoed through the chamber. Footsteps, many of them approaching from multiple tunnels. The Ice Warden's expression hardened. It seems, they said, that we are about to be interrupted. The Council, it appears, has more than one way to reach the heart of my domain. They turned to Seris, their next words heavy with destiny. Choose quickly, Flame Weaver. The moment of truth approaches, and with it, the price. Of true harmony. The frozen heart's pulses grew stronger, more urgent, as the footsteps drew closer. Whatever choice Seris would make, she would have to make it soon, and live with its consequences forever. The approaching footsteps grew louder, echoing through multiple tunnels leading to the heart chamber. But it was a different sound that made Seris's blood run cold, a familiar laugh coming from behind them. I must admit, Kira said, her voice carrying a new edge that Seris had never heard before. You've made this much easier than I expected. She pulled something from her pack, the traitor's mirror, its surface swimming with dark energies that seemed to drink in the light from the frozen heart. Kira? Seris turned, disbelief warring with growing understanding. What are you doing? Completing my mission. The stone singer held the mirror up, its surface beginning to pulse in a counter-rhythm to the frozen heart. The Council didn't just want the entrance sealed, they wanted to be sure no one could ever reach the heart chamber again. But to do that, they needed to know exactly where it was. Aldrin stepped forward, his expression grim. You've been mapping the true paths through the tombs, not to preserve knowledge, but to help them destroy it. And knowledge? Kira laughed again, but there was no warmth in it. This isn't about knowledge, this is about power, real power, not these pretty lessons about harmony and balance. She gestured at the frozen heart with the mirror. Do you have any idea what we could do with this kind of energy if we weren't worried about maintaining some ancient equilibrium? The traitor's mirror began to glow more intensely, its surface revealing glimpses of other places, council chambers, secret meetings, carefully laid plans. Seris saw herself in its depths, watched through Kira's eyes over their journey, every discovery noted, every transformation measured. The council's been waiting for someone like you, Kira continued. Someone who could navigate the tomb's defenses, someone who could reach the heart. Thanks to your changes, thanks to the paths you've opened, their forces can finally reach this chamber. And once they're here, they'll destroy everything. The Ice Warden finished, their voice heavy with ancient sadness, just as they tried to do centuries ago when they first divided the powers. The mirror's surface rippled, and Seris caught a glimpse of her own reflection, but not as she was now. Instead, she saw herself as Kira and the Council imagined using her, a weapon, a tool, her hard-won harmony twisted into something else entirely. "It doesn't have to be this way," Seris said, reaching out to her former friend. "You've seen what the tombs can teach us. You've experienced the truth of balance yourself." "Balance is a myth," Kira snapped. "A pretty story to keep us from reaching our true potential. The Council understands this. That's why they've maintained the separation of powers all these years, not to protect anyone, but to prevent exactly this kind of transformation." She raised the mirror higher, and now, thanks to this artifact, we can ensure it never happens again. The traitor's mirror flared with dark purpose, sending out waves of energy that began to disrupt the chamber's delicate harmonies. The frozen heart's pulses became erratic, its balanced energies starting to fragment. "Stop!" Aldrin moved to intervene, but Kira pulled out a small crystal with her free hand, one that glowed with familiar energy. "Wondering how I managed to fool your wards, your protections? I've been collecting samples of your magic since the day you commissioned the maps." She smiled coldly. "The Council's artificers are quite skilled at repurposing other people's power." More footsteps now, closer, and with them came the sound of ice cracking under powerful magic. The Council's forces were nearly there, following the paths that Seris herself had helped reveal. The Ice Warden's form began to shift more rapidly, responding to the chamber's destabilizing energies. "The sword," they said to Seris, their voice urgent. "Only its power can counter what she's unleashed, but remember what I said about its price." Seris looked between the suspended blade and the traitor's mirror, understanding dawning. The sword wasn't just a weapon of harmony, it was a choice made manifest. To claim it would mean more than just gaining its power. It would mean accepting a fundamental change, one that could never be undone. "Don't even think about it," Kira warned, adjusting the mirror's angle. "The Council knows about the sword too. Why do you think they were so interested in Aldrin's research? They've spent years studying how to neutralize its power." But something in her voice, some slight tremor, caught Seris's attention. She looked closer at her former friend's reflection in the mirror's surface and saw what the artifact's power revealed. Uncertainty, fear, and underneath it all, a desperate kind of hope. "The mirror shows truth, doesn't it?" Seris asked quietly. "Not just the truths we want to see, but all of them. That's why the Council gave it to you, so you could lead them to the heart. But have you looked into it yourself?" "Really looked?" Kira's expression flickered. "Don't try to manipulate me. I know what I'm doing." "Do you?" Seris took a careful step forward, her transformed magic responding to the mirror's power in unexpected ways. "Because I think you're starting to understand what these tombs really are, what they're trying to teach us. The mirror's shown you that too, hasn't it?" For a moment, doubt crossed Kira's face. She glanced at her own reflection, and something like pain flashed in her eyes. Then the chamber walls shook as the Council's forces drew closer, and her expression hardened again. "It doesn't matter what I understand," she said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "The Council will be here any moment. The heart chamber will be sealed forever, and you—" She raised the mirror one final time. "You'll learn what happens to those who threaten the established order." The traitor's mirror pulsed with gathered power, its surface now a storm of competing energies. But as Seris watched her reflection fragment and reform in its depths, she realized something crucial. The mirror didn't just show truth, it showed possibility, and in its endless reflections, she saw not just what was, but what could be. She had a fraction of a second to make her choice. The sword hung waiting, its power calling to her transformed magic. The council's forces were moments away, and Kira stood ready to shatter everything the tombs had taught them about harmony and balance. But perhaps, Seris thought, remembering, every lesson the tombs had shown her, that wasn't the only choice available. Perhaps there was another way, one that required not just understanding harmony, but truly living it. She raised her hands, gathering her power, and prepared to show everyone in the chamber exactly what the ice tombs had been trying to teach them all along. In the fraction of time between Kira's betrayal and the council's arrival, Seris made her choice. Instead of reaching for the sword directly, she sent her transformed magic out in a wave that touched both the frozen heart and the traitor's mirror simultaneously. The chamber filled with crystalline resonance as three ancient powers, heart, mirror, and her own harmonized energy, created an unexpected symphony. "What are you doing?" Kira demanded, trying to maintain her grip on the mirror as it began to vibrate with new purpose. The sword of living flame hung in its alcove, its surface beginning to ripple with responsive energy. Unlike the legends that painted it as a pure fire weapon, Seris could now see its true nature. The blade was neither flame nor frost, but something that existed in the space between, just like the power she had learned to wield. "Showing you what the mirror's been trying to tell you all along," Seris answered, maintaining the delicate balance between energies. "It doesn't just show truth, it shows potential. Look, the mirror's surface erupted with images. Kira mapping the ice tombs, not for destruction, but for understanding. The council learning to embrace harmony instead of fearing it. Valdora transformed. Not by force, but by balanced change. Possibility after possibility, reflected and multiplied, each one showing a different path to the same essential truth. The sword isn't just a weapon," Seris continued, taking a step toward it. "It's a choice, made manifest, and I choose to show you why." Yoshi reached out, not with her hand, but with her transformed magic, letting it touch the sword's ancient power. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The blade burst into light that was neither fire nor ice, but pure harmony incarnate, its surface flowing like liquid starlight. The Ice Warden's voice cut through the chamber's resonance. "The price, Flame Weaver, remember the price." "I understand now," Seris replied, her voice steady despite the energies surging around her. "The price isn't what we give up, it's what we become." With that understanding, she grasped the sword's hilt. Power unlike anything she had ever experienced flooded through her. The sword's magic recognized her transformed nature, responding, not just to her ability to balance fire and ice, but to her understanding of why that balance mattered. Images flashed through her mind. The sword's creation in the days before the division of powers, its use as both weapon and teaching tool, its final hiding place in the heart chamber when harmony was shattered. "Impossible," Kira whispered, the traitor's mirror trembling in her hands as it reflected the sword's awakening. "The council's research said nothing about this, because they only looked for what they feared," Aldrin said, watching his student with pride and concern. "Not for what could be." The sword's power continued to flow into Seris, changing her further, but unlike the tomb's previous transformations, this one felt like coming home, like becoming what she had always been meant to be. Her magic expanded, deepened, became something both more and less than simple power. The chamber walls shook as the council's forces finally breached the outer defenses, but Seris barely noticed. She was too absorbed in what the sword was showing her, the true history of Valdora's magic, the careful balance that had once existed between all forms of power, the possibility of restoring what was lost. "The sword remembers," she said, echoing the Ice Wraith's words from what felt like a lifetime ago. It remembers everything, including how to heal what was broken. She raised the blade, and its light filled the chamber with impossible colors. Where the radiance touched the walls, the ice became transparent, revealing layer upon layer of magical history frozen in its depths. The frozen heart pulsed in rhythm with the sword's power, their energies harmonizing in ways that hadn't been seen for centuries. Kira stared at the display, the traitor's mirror reflecting endless variations of this moment. "The council said the sword was a weapon of destruction," she said, her voice uncertain, "that it could unmake the eternal winter by force." "They weren't entirely wrong," the Ice Warden replied, their form stabilizing as the sword's power touched them. "It could unmake the winter. But destruction isn't its purpose. Transformation is." As if to demonstrate this truth, the sword's light began to change the very nature of the chamber around them. Ice that had been solid for centuries began to flow like water, then crystallize into new forms that sang with harmonic energy. The air itself seemed to come alive with possibilities. "The Council's forces are almost here," Aldrin warned, though he couldn't take his eyes off the sword's display. "Whatever you're planning, Seris, it needs to happen now." But Seris was already moving, guided by the sword's ancient knowledge. She approached Kira, who raised the mirror in defense. "Stay back!" "Look one more time," Seris said gently, letting the sword's light play across the mirror's surface. "Not at what is, or what the Council fears, but at what could be." The mirror's reflection shifted one final time, showing Kira not as the Council's agent, but as she truly was, someone caught between duty and understanding, fear and hope. In the reflection, she saw herself as she could be, a preserver of knowledge rather than its destroyer, a mapper of new possibilities rather than old boundaries. "It's not too late," Seris offered, extending her free hand. "The sword shows us the way things were, but more importantly, it shows us what they could become. Help me show them. Help me remind everyone what true harmony feels like." For a long moment, Kira stood frozen, looking between the mirror's revelation and the approaching sounds of the Council's forces. Then, slowly, she lowered the artifact. "How?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How do we change centuries of division?" Seris smiled, the sword's light reflecting in her eyes like hope given form. "The same way the tombs changed us, one transformation at a time." The chamber's far wall finally broke open, admitting the first of the Council's warriors. They entered with weapons of ice and flame ready, prepared for battle. What they found instead was something their centuries of separation had left them, unprepared to face, a demonstration of true harmony that would shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about power. Seris raised the sword of living flame, its light filling the chamber with the promise of change. The time had come to show Valdora that there was another way, not through force or fear, but through the same balance that the ice tombs had been, teaching all along. The sword pulsed in her grip, ready to help her keep that promise, no matter the cost. The Council's warriors poured into the heart chamber, led by a figure wearing the storm crown, an ancient artifact of pure ice that crackled. With contained power, Councillor Theron himself wore it, its crystalline spires rising from his brow like frozen lightning. "So," he said, his voice carrying new authority granted by the crown's power, "this is what becomes of those who delve too deeply into forbidden knowledge." His gaze swept the chamber, taking in the frozen heart, the transformed Seris with her impossible sword, and the Ice Warden's shifting form. "Kira, you've done well leading us here. Now step aside." But Kira didn't move. She stood beside Seris, the traitor's mirror now turned to face the Council's forces, showing them reflections they seemed reluctant to see. "Look," she said, her voice stronger than before. "Look at what we could be." Theron's expression hardened. "We've seen enough of possibility. What Valdora needs is certainty." The storm crown flared with power, sending waves of intense cold through the chamber. "The eternal winter isn't our enemy. It's our shield, our protection against the chaos that harmony would bring." Protection. Seris raised the sword of living flame, its light creating a counterpoint to the crown's frost. Or control. The winter. grows deeper each year because you've disrupted the natural balance. You're not protecting Valdora, you're slowly killing it. The council warriors spread out around the chamber's edge, some wielding ice magic, others carrying flame-touched weapons, but none seemed eager to be the first to attack, not with the sword's harmonious light filling the space. The storm. Crown shows the truth of winter's power, Theron declared, raising his hands. Ice began to form in complex patterns around him, building into a fortress of frost. All other magics are pale imitations of its purity. Then why fear harmony so much? Seris challenged. She touched the sword's light to a nearby ice formation, and instead of melting, it transformed, becoming something that was neither solid nor liquid, neither cold nor hot, but a perfect balance of states. The Ice Warden moved to stand beside her, their forms stabilizing into something more human than they'd appeared before. The crown was never meant to be used alone, they said, addressing Theron directly. It was forged as a partner to summer's warmth, not its replacement. Lies, Theron snapped, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. The ancient records show exactly what you wanted them to show, Aldrin interrupted, stepping forward with a scholar's confidence. I've spent years studying the true histories. The Storm Crown and the Summer Circlet were meant to be used together, maintaining the balance of seasons. But your predecessors chose to hide one and corrupt the other. The Crown's power surged. Responding to Theron's anger, ice began to creep across the chamber's walls, threatening to entomb them all. And what would you have us do? Return to the chaos of changing seasons? Let fire and ice run unchecked through our streets? No, Seris said quietly. She raised the sword, letting its harmonious light touch the crown's frost. Where the energies met, something remarkable happened. The ice began to sing, creating patterns of pure, crystalline music. I would have us remember what we once were, what we could be again. The Storm Crown resonated with the sword's power, its light changing from pure white to something more complex, more alive. Theron reached up to touch it, wonder warring with fear on his face. The crown remembers too, the Ice Warden explained. As all ancient magic remembers, the question is, will you listen to what it's trying to tell you? For a moment it seemed as though understanding might win. The council warriors shifted uneasily, watching as their leader struggled with the crown's awakening memories. Some even lowered their weapons, drawn by the harmony that filled the chamber. But then Theron's expression hardened again. Enough! He thrust his hands forward, and the Storm Crown's power exploded outward in a wave of killing frost. If you won't protect Valdora's stability, then you'll be removed, like all other threats to our survival. Seris met the attack with the sword of living flame, not fighting the frost, but accepting it, transforming it, showing it another way to be. The energies clashed in the center of the chamber, creating a storm of competing magics that threatened to tear the very air apart. "Stop!" Kira shouted, raising the traitor's mirror. "Look what your fear is doing!" The mirror's surface reflected the truth of the moment, how the conflict between crown and sword was awakening something deep within the glacier, something that had slept for centuries. The frozen heart began to pulse erratically, its balanced energies disrupted by the magical storm. "The tombs are alive," Aldrin warned, reading the signs with a scholar's expertise. "If we continue fighting here, we risk more than just our own lives. The entire glacier could collapse, taking half of Valdora with it." But Theron was beyond hearing. The Storm Crown's power had taken hold of him, turning his fear of change into a weapon that threatened everything. Ice continued to pour from his hands, now tinged with colors that shouldn't exist in nature. Seris felt the sword responding to the escalating danger, showing her images of what needed to be done. It wasn't a battle that needed to be won. It was a balance that needed to be restored. "Kira," she called, never taking her eyes off Theron. "The mirror. Show him. Show everyone. Not what they fear, but what the crown remembers." Understanding dawned in Kira's eyes. She moved to where the mirror's reflection could catch both crown and sword, both ice and flame, both past and possibility. Its surface blazed with revelation, showing the Stormcrown's true purpose, not as a weapon of winter's dominance, but as half of a greater whole. The council warriors, who could see the mirror's display, faltered, their certainty shaken by visions of what Valdora had once been, what it could be again. But Theron fought against the revelation, pushing more power through the crown. The magical storm intensified, and the chamber's walls began to crack under the strain. They were out of time. Seris looked at the sword in her hands, understanding what it was asking of her. The price the Ice Warden had warned about wasn't just about power. It was about responsibility, about being willing to do whatever was necessary to restore the harmony that had been lost. She caught Aldrin's eye, saw him nod in understanding and pride. Then she raised the sword of living flame and prepared to show everyone exactly what true harmony could do. The storm of ice and possibility rose around them, and the heart chamber trembled on the edge of transformation. As the magical storm raged around them, the Ice Warden withdrew a small, leather-bound book from their robes, the Warden's journal, its pages glowing with centuries of accumulated wisdom. "There's something you need to understand," they said, their voice cutting through the chaos, "before you make your final choice." The journal opened of its own accord, its pages turning to reveal text that shifted between ice crystal patterns and flames. "I wasn't always the Ice Warden. Once I was like you, a seeker of harmony, a believer in balance." Their form flickered, showing glimpses of who they had been. A young mage wearing both the storm crown and its missing counterpart, the summer circlet. "You were the last one to wear both crowns," Seris realized, the sword's power helping her understand. "Before the division, before the fear." The Warden's voice held centuries of regret. "I thought I could maintain the balance alone, that by preserving the knowledge here in the tombs, I could prevent its complete loss. But isolation changes you. Watching from these frozen halls as generation after generation chose fear over harmony." They gestured at the journal, which now showed scenes of Valdora's gradual transformation into a winter-bound realm. Theron, still wrestling with the Storm Crown's awakening memories, laughed bitterly. "So you admit it? You've been working against the Council all along." "No," the Warden corrected, their form solidifying further. "I've been waiting, watching, testing those who entered the tombs to find someone who could understand what was lost and why it matters." They turned to Seris. "Your master came close. He understood the theory, the history, but you've learned to live it." The journal's pages turned again, revealing diagrams of the frozen heart and the sword Seris now held. The heart isn't just a source of power, it's a nexus of possibility. Every choice, every path, every potential future for Valdora exists within its crystalline matrix. The sword doesn't just channel that power, it helps its wielder see and shape those possibilities. Which is exactly why such power must be contained. Theron thrust the Stormcrown's power forward again, its frost now threaded with streaks of darkness. "Look what believing in harmony cost you. Eternal imprisonment in these tombs." "You still don't understand," the Warden said sadly. "I'm not imprisoned here. I chose to remain, to become part of the tombs themselves, because someone had to remember. Someone had to maintain the possibility of harmony until the right person came to restore it." They looked at Seris. "But that restoration comes with a price higher than any I paid." The journal showed one final image, a figure wreathed in balanced in power, neither fully human nor fully elemental, becoming something new, something necessary. "The sword shows us what could be," Seris said, understanding dawning. "But someone has to make that possibility real. Someone has to become the bridge," the Warden finished, "between fire and ice, between what was and what could be. Not trapped in the tombs like I was, but moving freely between all states of being." They closed the journal gently. "That's the true price of wielding the sword. Not just using its power, but becoming a living embodiment of the harmony it represents." Kira, who had been studying the scene in the traitor's mirror, suddenly gasped. "The reflections, they're showing it. Every possible future where harmony is restored has you at its heart, Seris. Not as you are now, but as something more. The sword pulsed in Seris's grip, confirming the truth. To truly restore balance to Valdora, she would have to become like the Ice Warden, a guardian of harmony, but one who walked in the world above rather than remaining hidden in the tombs. The transformation would be permanent, irreversible, changing her very nature. "And if I refuse?" she asked, although she already knew the answer. The Warden gestured at the escalating magical storm, where Theron's corrupted winter magic clashed with the heart's pure energy. Then the imbalance continues. The winter deepens. Eventually the weight of all that suppressed power tears Valdora apart. They met her eyes. "I've seen it in the heart's matrix. Every future where harmony isn't restored ends in destruction, not just of the kingdom, but of everything we've preserved here." Eldrin stepped forward, his expression pained but proud. "I suspected this might be the price when I began my research. It's why I taught you about balance from the very beginning, preparing you for this choice, even before I understood it fully myself." The storm intensified around them, and cracks began to appear in the chamber's walls. The frozen heart's pulse became more erratic, responding to the growing chaos. They were running out of time. Seris looked at the sword in her hands, feeling its power thrumming through her transformed magic. She thought of all the changes she'd already undergone in the tombs, each one teaching her more about the true nature of harmony. This final change would be the greatest, not just wielding balanced power, but becoming its living embodiment. "You see?" Theron called out, his voice distorted by the Stormcrown's influence. "Even your own guardian admits that harmony demands too high a price. Better to maintain control, to live in fear," Seris interrupted, "to let that fear slowly kill everything we could be." She raised the sword, letting its light show everyone in the chamber the truth she now understood. The price isn't too high, it's exactly what's necessary. The Ice Warden nodded slowly, their form beginning to fade. "Then you understand what must be done. The choice, as always, is yours." The journal's pages turned one final time, showing an image of Valdora as it could be. A kingdom where fire and ice danced in harmony, where winter and summer shared the skies, where magic flowed in its complete, unified form. All it would cost was everything Seris had ever been. She looked at Aldrin, her teacher who had prepared her for this moment without knowing exactly what it would demand. At Kira, who had found her own way back to truth through the mirror's revelations. At the council warriors, their certainty wavering as they witnessed powers they had been taught to fear. The sword's light filled her awareness, showing her exactly what she would become if she accepted this final transformation. Not quite human anymore, but not quite elemental either. A bridge between states, a guardian of harmony who would walk between fire and ice, teaching others what the tombs had taught her. The price was everything. The alternative was worse. Seris raised the sword of living flame and prepared to make her choice. The battlefield map materialized in the air above them, a magical projection created by the frozen heart's power. It showed not just the physical space of the chamber, but the flows of energy and possibility that coursed through it. As Seris made her choice, raising the sword to accept her transformation, the map blazed with new patterns of potential. "No!" Theron's voice cracked with desperate authority. "I won't let you destroy everything we've built." The Stormcrown's power erupted from him in a wave of killing frost, aimed not at Seris, but at the frozen heart itself. Seris moved without thinking, stepping between the attack and the heart. The sword in her hands caught the frost, but instead of deflecting it, she let it flow through her, already beginning her transformation. Ice crystals formed along her skin, not freezing her, but becoming part of her, just as flames began to dance in her eyes. "You'll kill us all!" Kira shouted, holding up the traitor's mirror to show everyone the consequences of Theron's actions. The map above them shifted, displaying fracture lines spreading through the glacier's core. The council warriors, seeing the danger reflected in both mirror and map, began to waver. Some lowered their weapons, while others looked to Theron with growing uncertainty. "The crown remembers," Seris said, her voice taking on new harmonics as her change progressed. "Let it show you the truth." For a moment, it seemed to work. The storm crown's light flickered, its ancient memories of harmony fighting against centuries of corrupted purpose. Theron's hands went to his temples as images of its true nature flooded his mind. But fear proved stronger than memory. "Lies!" he snarled, and thrust his power outward again. This time, the crown's magic came with a different quality, not just winter's cold, but winter's hunger. It began to draw heat from everything it touched, creating a deep, killing frost that threatened to freeze even the possibility of change. The map above them turned crystalline, showing the battle's effects rippling out through the tomb's structure. The Ice Warden, their form growing fainter, pointed to spreading lines of destabilization. The balance shifts too far. If the heart falls to pure winter, Seris understood. The frozen heart maintained more than just the tomb's power. It helped stabilize the entire glacier. If Theron's twisted winter magic corrupted it, the resulting collapse would devastate Valdora. She had to complete her transformation before that happened, had to become what the sword needed her to be. But Theron's attack required her attention, forcing her to split her focus between becoming and defending. "Buy her time!" Aldrin called out. He began weaving flames in complex patterns, not attacking but creating a barrier against the killing frost. Kira joined him, using the mirror to reflect and multiply their defensive efforts. The council warriors looked between their leader and the spreading danger shown in the magical map. Finally, one stepped forward, then another, until half of them stood with Aldrin, adding their power to the defense. Ice magic and flame weaving worked together for the first time in centuries, creating shields of harmonious energy. But Theron's power had grown beyond reason. The storm crown, corrupted by generations of fear, responded to his desperation with devastating force. Ice began to climb the chamber walls, not the living ice of the tombs, but something dead and hungry. The map showed it spread like a disease through the glacier's heart. Seris continued her transformation, letting the sword's power reshape her essence. Fire and ice merged within her, changing her into something that had not existed since the days of the first Ice Warden. But it wasn't happening fast enough. Theron's attack was corrupting the heart more quickly than she could change. Then Kira did something unexpected. She stepped through the defensive barrier, holding the traitor's mirror before her like a shield. "Look!" she commanded, forcing Theron to see his reflection. "Look at what you're becoming!" The mirror showed him, not as he saw himself, a defender of stability, but as he truly was, a man consumed by fear, wielding a corrupted artifact that was destroying everything it was meant to protect. For a crucial moment his attack faltered. Seris seized that moment. The sword's power surged through her nearly transformed being, and she thrust its harmonious light into the heart of Theron's winter storm, not fighting it, but offering it. A choice, just as the tombs had offered her choices throughout her journey. The map above them blazed with possibility. In its crystalline projections, they could all see the moment balanced on a knife's edge. One path led to destruction, to the collapse of everything the tombs had preserved. The other led through Seris's transformation, through the restoration of harmony, through change that would reshape not just her, but all of Valdora. The sword showed her how to open that path for everyone, how to make her choice a gateway for others to follow. She opened herself fully to its power, completing her transformation in a surge of harmonious energy. Her form became something new, neither human nor elemental, but a bridge between all states of being. Fire and ice moved through her as naturally as breath, and the very air around her shimmered with potential. The map recorded her change, showing new lines of force emanating from her transformed being. Where they touched the corrupted ice from Theron's attack, they began to transform it, offering it a path back to harmony. But Theron wasn't finished. With a roar of denial, he poured everything he had left into one final attack, the Storm Crown. blazed with killing power, and the temperature in the chamber dropped to levels that should have been impossible. The magical map shattered, its projections dissolving into chaos as the battle reached its climax. Everything balanced on Seris's next action, and on whether her transformation had given her enough power to match Theron's desperate assault. She raised the sword of living flame, its light now perfectly attuned to her new nature. The choice that had begun with her first step into the ice tombs was about to reach its conclusion. Above them, the frozen heart pulsed like a countdown, measuring the moments until harmony would either be restored or lost forever. The soul crystal, hanging at Seris's throat, transformed from her original ember pendant, pulsed with each wave of change flowing through her newly harmonized being. Its surface reflected what she was becoming, a creature of both fire and frost, her human form now suffused with elemental energy that shifted between states like light through crystal. Time seemed to slow as Theron's final attack approached. In that stretched moment, the soul crystal showed Seris exactly what her transformation would cost her, not just her humanity, but her connections to the world she had known. She would become something new, something necessary, but also something apart. The price of power, the Ice Warden's voice echoed in her mind, is not in the gaining, but in the becoming. The killing frost from Theron's corrupted crown reached her first. Instead of fighting it, she let it flow through her transformed being, understanding it in ways her human self never could. The ice wasn't just cold. It was memory frozen in fear, possibility locked in stasis, change denied until it became destruction. "I see you," she said to the frost, her voice carrying new harmonics that made the very air crystallize and melt in patterns of pure energy. "I see what you were meant to be." The soul crystal flared, channeling her new awareness through the sword of living flame. Its light touched Theron's attack, not opposing but offering transformation. Ice became water, became steam, became ice again, each state flowing into the next in an endless dance of possibility. Theron staggered, the Stormcrown's power faltering as it encountered something it couldn't simply freeze. What are you doing?" "Showing you what harmony feels like," Seris answered. She stepped forward, each footfall leaving traces of both frost and flame that spiraled together instead of cancelling out. "Showing everyone what we lost when we chose fear over understanding." The soul crystal pulsed again, stronger, and Seris felt another wave of transformation roll through her. Her perception expanded, letting her see not just the physical chamber, but the flows of power that connected everything within it. The Council Warrior's magic, once rigidly separated into fire and ice, now showed traces of natural harmony trying to reassert itself. The frozen heart's matrix of possibility glowed with potential futures, spreading out from this moment like crystal facets catching light. But it was Theron himself who drew her transformed sight most strongly. Within him, beneath the Stormcrown's corruption, she saw a lifetime of genuine belief. He had thought he was protecting Valdora, thought the eternal winter was necessary for survival. That truth, that sincerity of purpose, was what made him so dangerous and what gave her the key to reaching him. "You wanted to preserve Valdora," she said, taking another step forward, "to keep it safe from change that might destroy it." Another step, and the soul crystal's light merged with the sword's. "But look what that fear of change has done to you, to all of us." The crystal's power let her project what she saw, not just to Theron, but to everyone in the chamber. They all witnessed the gradual corruption of the Stormcrown, how generations of fear had twisted its protective purpose into something that now threatened to destroy what it was meant to preserve. Theron tried to maintain his attack, but doubt had crept into his eyes. The crown's power flickered as its ancient memories of harmony fought against centuries of misuse. "If we let go of winter's protection," he began, "we gain something greater," Seris finished. She lifted the sword, letting its light illuminate the truth. Not weakness, but strength. Not chaos, but dance. Not ending, but transformation. The soul crystal blazed with confirmation, showing them all glimpses of what could be Valdora reborn, not through the destruction of winter, but through the restoration of natural cycles, ice and flame working together as they were meant to, each strengthening the other instead of fighting for dominance. But the crystal also showed the cost. As Seris completed her transformation, she felt the last threads of her old life burning away. Human concerns, human connections, human limitations, all transforming into something larger but also more removed. She would be able to guide others to harmony, but never again experience life as they did. Uldren, watching his student become something beyond his teaching, stepped forward. "Seris, I understand now," she said, meeting his eyes one last time as his equal. "Why you prepared me for this, why it had to be a choice." The soul crystal pulsed with her words, showing how each lesson, each trial, had led to this moment of becoming. Kira raised the traitor's mirror, its surface reflecting Seris's transformation in endless variations. "The council was right to fear this power," she said softly. "Not because it would destroy us, but because it would change us. All of us." "Yes," Seris agreed. "But change was always coming. The only choice was whether it would come through harmony or through collapse." As if to emphasize her words, the chamber shuddered. Theron's corrupted winter magic had weakened the glacier's structure, and the frozen heart's stabilizing influence was failing. They had moments left before everything would be lost. The soul crystal showed Seris what needed to be done. It would take everything she had become, every aspect of her transformed being. She would have to open herself completely to the power of harmony, become a living channel for the balance that the tombs had preserved for so long. The price would be the last remnants of what she had been. The reward would be the chance to show others the way to a new kind of existence. "Let me show you," she said to everyone in the chamber, but especially to Theron. "Let me show you what we can become." The soul crystal flared one final time as Seris embraced her full transformation. Fire and ice merged within her, becoming something that transcended both, something that could reshape not just herself, but the very nature of magic in Valdora. She raised the sword of living flame, now perfectly attuned to her harmonized being, and prepared to demonstrate what true power looked like when it flowed from understanding rather than fear. The chamber held its breath, waiting to see if transformation would prove stronger than destruction. The spring seal, dormant for centuries, within the frozen heart's matrix, began to glow as Seris channeled the full power of harmony through her transformed being. Ancient runes of awakening spiraled across its surface, each one representing a different aspect of change: ice to water, winter to spring, fear to understanding. "Enough!" Theron's voice cracked with desperate authority. The storm crown blazed with corrupted power, sending out waves of killing frost that threatened to freeze even the possibility of transformation. "I won't let you destroy everything we've built." "Not destroy," Seris corrected, her harmonized voice carrying new depths of understanding. "Transform, as all things must." She raised the sword of living flame, letting its light interact with the spring seal's awakening power. Where the energies met, reality itself seemed to soften, becoming more receptive to change. The chamber shuddered as two fundamental forces clashed: the rigid preservation of eternal winter versus the fluid potential of natural cycles. Ice crystals formed and melted in impossible patterns, creating brief sculptures of what might be, before dissolving into new possibilities. "Look!" Seris commanded, directing the spring seal's power to show truth rather than force it. "Look at what winter has become under your fear." The seal's light revealed the glacier as it truly was, not a natural formation, but a prison of frozen time, each layer holding memories of chances denied, changes prevented, harmony forgotten. The eternal winter hadn't preserved Valdora. It had slowly crystallized it, turning a living kingdom into a beautiful but dying artifact. "The crown remembers," she continued, watching Theron struggle with his artifact's awakening memories. It remembers that winter was never meant to stand alone. It was meant to dance with spring, to sleep and wake in endless cycles of renewal. The spring seal pulsed stronger, responding to her words. Its power touched the storm crown, not fighting its frost, but reminding it of its true purpose. For a moment Theron's eyes cleared as the crown showed him what it had once been, not a weapon of domination, but a tool of transformation. But the chaos, he protested, though his attack faltered, the uncertainty of change is necessary for life itself. Seris took another step forward, her transformed being leaving footprints of possibility in the chamber's ice. Let me show you what harmony really means. She opened herself fully to the spring seal's power, letting it flow through her harmonized nature and into the sword. The blade's light changed, becoming something that neither illuminated nor melted, but instead revealed the potential within all things. Where this light touched the chamber's ice, it didn't destroy, it awakened. Frozen memories stirred, ancient magics remembered their original purposes, and the very structure of the glacier began to sing with renewed possibility. The council warriors watched in awe as ice they had been taught to control transformed before their eyes. It became something alive, something that could change without breaking, flow without losing its essential nature. Some of them lowered their weapons, drawn forward by the recognition of what magic could truly be. But Theron wasn't finished. With a roar of denial, he poured everything he had left into the storm crown. Winter magic exploded outward, no longer just freezing, but trying to lock all of reality into a single, unchanging moment. "You'll destroy us all," Kira shouted, the traitor's mirror in her hands, showing the catastrophic consequences of his desperate action. The glacier's structure was beginning to fail, the weight of too much preserved time threatening to collapse into chaos. Seris stood her ground as the killing frost approached. The spring seal blazed with protective power, but she didn't use it to shield herself. Instead, she opened herself wider, letting her transformed being become a lens through which Theron's magic could see itself truly. "Your power isn't evil," she said to the approaching winter. "It isn't wrong to want to preserve, to protect, to maintain. But nothing preserved can stay pure without change. Nothing protected can grow without transformation. Nothing maintained can live without renewal." The spring seal's light merged with her words, showing everyone in the chamber the truth of natural cycles. They saw how winter and summer had once danced together, each making the other more beautiful. They saw how the eternal frost had begun as a shield, but became a cage, trapping Valdora in a slow decline, masked as preservation. Most importantly, they saw through Seris's transformed perception what harmony truly meant. Not the elimination of winter, but its restoration to its proper place in the great dance of seasons. Not the destruction of the old ways, but their transformation into something that could live and grow again. Theron's attack reached her, and for a moment everything hung in balance. The Storm Crown's power fought against her offer of transformation, trying to maintain its corrupted purpose through sheer force of desperate belief. But belief, Seris now understood, was itself a kind of transformation. With infinite gentleness, she opened herself to Theron's magic, accepting its cold, its fear, its desperate need to preserve. The spring seal responded, its power flowing through her to show his winter a new way to be. Ice became water, became vapor, became ice again, each state flowing naturally into the next. The Storm Crown's frost touched her transformed being and found not an enemy to fight, but a harmony to remember. Ancient memories stirred within the crown itself as its true nature awakened. "Oh," Theron breathed, his voice small with wonder. The crown's light changed, losing its corrupted edge as understanding finally broke through centuries of fear. I remember," the spring seal pulsed one final time, and the chamber filled with visions of possibility. Everyone present saw what Valdora could become, a kingdom where winter and summer shared the seasons, where ice and flame worked together in endless cycles of renewal, where harmony meant not the absence of change, but its embrace. But first, they had to survive the consequences of what fear had wrought. The glacier's structure was still failing, centuries of suppressed change threatening to release all at once. The frozen heart's matrix trembled with instability, and cracks began to spread through the chamber's walls. Seris looked at the spring seal, understanding what it was asking of her. The price of saving Valdora would be even higher than the price of her transformation. But as she had learned throughout her journey through the ice tombs, the most important choices were never about what you could gain, but what you were willing to become. She raised the sword of living flame one final time, its light now perfectly attuned to both her harmonized nature and the spring seal's purpose. The time had come to show everyone not just what harmony looked like, but what it could accomplish. When wielded by someone willing to pay its full price, the chamber held its breath as Seris prepared to transform not just herself, not just the storm crown, but the very nature of magic in Valdora itself. In the heart of the transformed chamber, a single flower pushed through the ice. The first flower, a physical manifestation of the change now spreading through Valdora. Its petals held both frost and flame, each state enhancing rather than destroying the other. Around it, the glacier's very structure was beginning to shift, not melting but awakening to new possibilities. Seris, her transformed being now more energy than flesh, guided the process with infinite care. Through her harmonized senses, she could feel every ripple of change as it spread outward from the heart chamber. The first flower marked the beginning, but what followed would reshape their entire world. "It's beautiful," Kira whispered, watching through the traitor's mirror as the transformation spread. "And terrible. And necessary." Indeed, the changes weren't gentle. Centuries of suppressed natural cycles were releasing at once, requiring all of Seris's newfound power to guide them into harmony rather than chaos. The ice tombs themselves were changing, their passages and chambers becoming conduits for the restored flow of balanced magic. Theron stood silent, the storm crown now quiet on his brow. Its corruption had been cleansed, but the price was heavy. Like Seris, it had been transformed into something new, something that could never return to what it had been. "The crown will need a new bearer," he said finally, his voice rough with understanding. "Someone who remembers its true purpose." "It already has one," Seris replied, her harmonized voice carrying new depths of certainty. She gestured to where the first flower bloomed, its presence creating a perfect balance point between winter and spring. "The crown belongs to the cycles now, not to any one wielder. Like all true power, it must be shared to remain pure." As if in response, the storm crown lifted from Theron's brow of its own accord. It hovered in the air, its structure flowing like liquid crystal until it split into multiple smaller coronets, each one holding a different aspect of winter's power. These scattered through the chamber, coming to rest on the heads of those who had shown understanding rather than fear. "The time of single rulers is past," Seris explained, watching as the crown's divided power created new connections between its bearers. "Harmony requires many voices, many hands, many hearts, all working in balance." The first flower continued to grow, its roots spreading through the awakening ice. Where they touched, new possibilities bloomed, not just flowers, but entire ecosystems of magical potential. The chamber filled with ghostly images of what was coming, forests of crystalline trees that flowered in winter and frosted in summer, rivers that carried both fire and ice in their waters, skies where snow and sunshine could dance together. Aldrin moved to stand beside his transformed student, his scholar's eyes bright with wonder and grief. "You cannot return from this, can you?" "No," Seris agreed, her form shifting between states like light through crystal. "But I'm not gone. I'm becoming what harmony needs, a bridge between what was and what could be, a guide for those who want to understand the dance of seasons." Around them, the first flower's influence continued to spread. Council warriors who had come to fight found themselves caught up in the transformation, their rigid separation of powers dissolving into more fluid possibilities. Some wept as they felt the touch of balanced magic for the first time, remembering what their ancestors had forgotten. "It will not be easy," the Ice Warden's voice echoed through the chamber one final time. "Change never is, but it will be right." Their form appeared briefly beside the first flower, more solid than it had been in centuries. "My watch is ended. The balance passes to new guardians." Kira stepped forward, the traitor's mirror now showing truth rather than deception. "What do we do now? How do we manage this much change?" "Together," Seris answered. She raised the sword of living flame, its light now perfectly attuned to the transformations flowing through Valdora. Each in our own way, but all in harmony. The first flower shows us how, each petal both frost and flame, each moment both ending and beginning. The chamber shuddered again, but not with destruction. The very walls were transforming, becoming permeable to the new flows of power. Through gaps in the ice, they could see the glacier outside changing too, not melting into chaos, but awakening into purpose. "The eternal winter isn't ending," Seris explained, sensing confusion in some of the observers. "It's transforming into what it always should have been. One season among many, one voice in a greater harmony. The ice tombs will remain, not as a prison of knowledge, but as a place of learning, where those who seek understanding can find their own path to balance." The first flower's growth reached a crucial point, its influence touching every corner of the chamber. Through her transformed senses, Seris could feel its power reaching even further, up through the glacier, into Valdora itself. Everywhere it touched, change followed. Ice mages discovering fire in their frost, flame weavers finding strength in winter's grace, ordinary citizens awakening to new possibilities in their daily lives. But the greatest changes were yet to come. Seris could feel them building, see them taking shape in the patterns of possibility that now filled her awareness. Valdora would need guidance through its transformation, need someone to show that harmony was possible, that change could lead to growth rather than destruction. She looked at her gathered companions, Aldrin with his wisdom, Kira with her newfound truth, Theron with his hard-earned understanding, and all the others who had witnessed the awakening of harmony. Each would have a part to play in what was to come. The first flower's petals opened fully, releasing a pulse of pure possibility into the transformed chamber. In that moment, everyone present felt what Seris had become, a being of harmony, a guardian of transformation, a bridge between all states of existence. She raised the sword one final time, its light now inseparable from her own transformed essence. "The thaw has begun," she declared, her voice carrying the weight of natural law. Not just of ice, but of minds and hearts. The question is, who will help guide it? Around the first flower, new growth appeared, not just single blooms, but entire gardens of possibility, each plant representing a different way that harmony could manifest. The time had come for everyone to choose their path in the transformed world. The chamber filled with light as dawn broke over Valdora for the first time in centuries, not ending the winter, but awakening it to new purpose in the endless dance of seasons. The new dawn crystal hung suspended in Valdora's transformed sky, its facets catching and reflecting both sunlight and snowfall. Created from the merger of ancient magics during the Great Transformation, it served as a constant reminder of what harmony could achieve. Those who looked upon it saw their own potential for change reflected back at them, each facet showing a different way that balance could manifest in their lives. Seris, her transformed being now as much light and possibility as substance, drifted through the streets of the awakening kingdom. Winter remained, but no longer as a prison of eternal frost. Now it danced with warming currents, creating new patterns of weather and magic that hadn't been seen in centuries. Through her harmonized senses, she could feel the pulse of life returning to Valdora, not despite the cold, but in perfect balance with it. The ice tombs had changed too. Their depths still held ancient secrets, but now they welcomed seekers of knowledge rather than trapping them. Aldrin had taken up residence there, teaching new generations about the true nature of balanced magic. Kira worked alongside him, using the Traitor's Mirror, now known as the Truth Seeker's Glass, to help students understand their own potential for transformation. Even Theron had found a new purpose. Freed from the Storm Crown's corruption, he now led a council of seasonal guardians, each wearing one of the Crown's divided aspects. Together, they ensured that no single power would ever again dominate Valdora's magic. The new dawn crystal pulsed gently as Seris approached, responding to her harmonized nature. Within its depths, she could see endless reflections of what Valdora was becoming, a kingdom where ice mages wove fire into their spells, where flame weavers danced with frost, where every citizen was discovering their own way to embrace the balance of natural forces. She had paid a heavy price for this transformation, becoming something beyond human understanding. But watching the crystal's light play across the awakening city, seeing how harmony was taking root in ways both large and small, she knew it had been worth it. The sword at her side hummed in agreement, its power now perfectly attuned to her transformed being. Together, they would continue to guide Valdora through its ongoing transformation, showing that true strength lay not in rigid preservation, but in the endless dance of change and renewal. As the new dawn crystal caught the light of another perfect sunrise, its facets showed not just what had been achieved, but what was still to come. Valdora's story, like the cycles of seasons themselves, would continue to unfold in endless patterns of harmony and transformation. And in the heart of the ice tombs, the first flower continued to bloom, its petals holding both frost and flame, eternal proof that even in the deepest winter, spring's promise endures.